There are 5 skills that we see in all readers who are good readers. The first of these is something called phonological awareness. And phonological awareness refers to the ability to be sound sensitive. So someone who is phonologically aware can hear the sounds in words, can hear different sounds in words, would be able to identify and recognize, say, 2 words that begin with a similar sound. In addition, good phonological awareness requires that you can hear words that rhyme, for instance. You are aware of the different sounds that letters make, and also the fact that some letters make different sounds depending on the words of which they are a part. The second characteristic of a good reader is that they have a knowledge of the alphabetic principle, and that is knowing that while the alphabet has 26 letters, those letters translate into about 44 different sounds. A good example is the letter A, which can make up to 5 different sounds depending on its position and its sound in the word. So another example is the letter C. C can have a hard sound, like in the word cake, but it can also have a soft sound, such as the word rice. So knowledge of the alphabetic principle is knowing that those 26 letters make 44 distinct and different sounds. Fluency, which is the third critical skill for good reading, is the ability to read smoothly. If you like, think about a fluent reader as someone who reads as if they are speaking. Now, fluency requires strong and efficient decoding skills, because if a child is struggling to make out letters, to make out sounds, to make out words, then they've got very little left to think about reading smoothly, reading fluently. It's one of the reasons when we are working with early years children and beginning readers, we should insist on them rereading books several times, because as they become more familiar with the words, they become more automatic at the decoding, and that means they can become more fluent with their reading. So fluency is essential for good reading and also for comprehension. There's lots of work being done on vocabulary being the 4th essential characteristic of a good reader. Interestingly, if children have heard words before they encounter them in print, they're much more likely to learn them and to learn them quickly. Some interesting studies around the world have looked at the number of words that children hear in their homes. So, for example, researchers have recorded number of words in professional homes, in welfare homes, in middle-income homes, and they've found that there's significant differences between the number of words that children hear in those homes. And why this matters is because vocabulary knowledge is a critical part of learning to read. Interestingly too, looking at the type of words, the negative v the positive sorts of language that students hear, and also found that in professional homes, children are much more likely to be exposed to positive language and vocabulary than negative, which is quite interesting when you look at the implications of vocabulary development for reading. I guess a good piece of advice to parents and to caregivers is just expose children to as much language and as many words as possible, because it seems to be that quantity is the key thing. The more words students are hearing, the more likely they are to use them, and then when it comes to reading, they're going to be more familiar with seeing them in a written form. So comprehension, which is our 5th important reading skill, is that ability to make meaning. Reading is about meaning making. It's a problem-solving activity, the sole purpose of which is for the reader to make meaning. Comprehension is linked very closely to vocabulary. If we know the words in the reading, we are more likely to be able to make sense of it. But it's also significantly linked to what the reader brings to the reading experience. And that is background knowledge, an awareness of the topic about which we're reading. So if we know a lot about a topic that we're reading about, we are likely to comprehend that text much more quickly than if we know very little. From a teaching point of view, and from supporting a child point of view as a supporting caregiver, before you read a book or you ask a student to read a book, if it's unfamiliar, just spend 2 or 3 minutes giving that background knowledge, talking about, rather than asking, because if they haven't got the background knowledge, they can't answer questions on it. But rather than asking, just tell them. So if you're reading about African animals, just spend 2 to 3 minutes talking about the different sorts of animals, where they live, what they eat, what they look like, and using the language of the book in the language of speech. So you're actually giving the students the background knowledge before they come to the reading, which makes comprehension a lot better.